They called it a family legacy, but I built every single vine with my own hands. For 12 years, I worked from sunrise to midnight, turning my parents' dying vineyard into a $6 million empire. Every award, every contract, every bottle that carried our family name, was because of me. Then, on my father's 70th birthday, they gathered everyone in the estate hall. I smiled, expecting a simple thank you. Instead, my father handed the CEO documents to my younger brother, the man who had never spent a single day in the vineyard. My mother looked me in the eyes and said, "You were only meant to build it. He was always meant to own it." Something inside me died in that moment. So I walked into my office, opened every cabinet, took every blueprint, every supplier agreement, every fermentation formula, every client strategy, and threw them into the fireplace. I watched years of my life's work turn into ashes. I didn't threaten them. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for justice. I simply walked away. 7 days later, the family vineyard lost $6 million. And when my parents came begging at my door, I gave them the one answer they never expected. The first time I stepped into our family's vineyard, I was just 16 years old. Most people remember vineyards as beautiful places, rows of lush green vines stretching across rolling hills, the scent of fresh grapes floating in the warm breeze, workers laughing as they harvested fruit under the golden sun. That wasn't what I saw. I saw dying vines, broken irrigation pipes, rust-covered tractors that hadn't worked in years, empty wine barrels stacked inside dusty warehouses. Our family business, Blackwood Vineyards, was on the edge of bankruptcy. My father stood in the middle of the field with tears in his eyes while bank officers inspected the property. Creditors called every day. Suppliers refused to deliver materials because months of invoices had gone unpaid. Everyone believed the vineyard would be sold within weeks, including my younger brother, Ethan. While I spent weekends pulling weeds and repairing fences, Ethan spent his days at luxury golf clubs with his friends. He hated getting dirt on his shoes. "The vineyard is finished," he would say with a laugh. "We should sell everything and enjoy whatever money we have left." Every time he said it, my father's face filled with disappointment. But strangely, he never corrected him. Instead, my father always looked at me. "Emma," he would say quietly, "you're the strong one." At 16 years old, I believed those words were a compliment. I didn't realize they were becoming a life sentence. After graduating from college with a degree in agricultural business, I received 3 incredible job offers. One was from a luxury winery in California. Another offered nearly $200,000 a year in Napa Valley. The third included company housing, bonuses, and international travel. Everyone told me to leave. Even my professors. "You have too much talent to waste it on a failing family vineyard." But family meant everything to me. I declined every offer. I came home. When I walked through the front gate, my father hugged me tightly. "I knew you'd never abandon us." My mother smiled proudly. "We've been praying you'd come back." Those words filled my heart with purpose. I promised myself that no matter how difficult it became, I would save Blackwood Vineyards. The first year nearly destroyed me. I woke every morning at 4:30. Before sunrise, I inspected irrigation systems. By 6, I worked beside laborers pruning damaged vines. After breakfast, I negotiated with suppliers who refused to trust our family anymore. Afternoons were spent studying soil reports, weather forecasts, grape diseases, and production costs. Evenings were dedicated to marketing plans, export licenses, customer databases, and financial spreadsheets. Most nights, I slept only 4 hours. While I was fighting to keep the business alive, Ethan posted pictures from expensive vacations, sports cars, luxury restaurants, weekend yacht parties. Every time I asked why he wasn't helping, my mother defended him. "Your brother isn't interested in farming. Everyone has different talents." My father would simply nod. Don't pressure him. So I stopped asking. I convinced myself that one hard-working child could carry the family. Slowly, the impossible began happening. Our grapes became healthier. Wine quality improved dramatically. A respected wine critic awarded our newest vintage 96 points. Restaurants started placing large orders. International distributors contacted us. For the first time in years, money flowed into the business. Within 5 years, our annual revenue tripled. Within 8, Blackwood Vineyards had become one of the fastest-growing wineries in the region. Business magazines featured my interviews. Agricultural universities invited me to speak. Industry experts called me one of the brightest vineyard managers of my generation. But whenever reporters asked my father how the company achieved such success, he smiled proudly and answered, "Our family worked together." Family. Not me. Never me. At first, I ignored it. Recognition wasn't why I worked so hard. I believed loyalty mattered more than applause. As the years passed, the vineyard transformed into something extraordinary. Modern production facilities. Award-winning wines. Luxury tasting rooms overlooking endless vineyards. Tourists traveled from around the world just to visit Blackwood Vineyards. The business was now valued at nearly $6 million. Every major decision. Every supplier contract. Every production formula. Every employee training program. Every international partnership had passed through my hands. Even our confidential fermentation techniques were documented in files I personally created over 12 years. Those files contained everything. If someone wanted to understand how Blackwood Vineyards became successful, those documents were the blueprint. I kept them locked inside my office. Not because I didn't trust my family, but because they represented 12 years of sacrifice. 12 years I could never get back. One evening, as I stood on the hill overlooking thousands of healthy grapevines glowing beneath the setting sun, I finally allowed myself to breathe. "We made it," I whispered. For the first time in over a decade, the vineyard was safe. The debt was gone. The future looked brighter than ever. I believed the hardest part of my life was finally over. I had no idea. The people I had sacrificed everything to save were already planning the greatest betrayal of my life. For 12 years, I never asked for ownership. I never asked for a larger salary. I never demanded recognition. I believed that one day my parents would simply look at me and say, "Emma, none of this would exist without you." That was all I ever wanted. One sentence. One moment. One acknowledgement that every scar on my hands, every sleepless night, every dream I sacrificed had meant something. Instead, the invitation arrived. Blackwood Vineyards, 70th birthday celebration for Richard Blackwood. My father's birthday. The entire wine industry would be there. Investors. Restaurant owners. Export partners. Journalists. Government officials. Nearly 300 guests. My assistant smiled as she handed me the invitation. "This is finally your night." I smiled too. Deep inside, I believed she was right. For weeks, everyone prepared for the celebration. The estate looked more beautiful than it ever had. Thousands of lights were wrapped around the vineyard. Fresh flowers lined every pathway. Luxury tents overlooked the rolling hills. The finest wines from our private reserve were displayed in crystal cases. Everything reflected the empire I had spent 12 years building. The morning of the event, I arrived before sunrise. I checked every table. Every wine bottle. Every guest list. Every employee schedule. I personally welcomed suppliers who had trusted me from the beginning. Many of them congratulated me before the ceremony even started. One elderly distributor shook my hand. "I've watched you save this vineyard from bankruptcy. Today your father will finally make it official." "What do you mean?" He smiled. Everyone knows you're becoming CEO. I laughed nervously. I haven't heard anything. He winked. Sometimes parents like surprises. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine it. Maybe today, everything would finally make sense. That evening, the celebration began. Music echoed through the vineyards. Guests laughed as they sampled our award-winning wines. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Journalists interviewed my father near the stage. I stood nearby, making sure everything ran smoothly. Then my mother approached me. She gently adjusted the collar of my dress. "You look beautiful tonight." "Thank you." She smiled warmly. "Your father has something very special planned." My heart raced. For a brief moment, I felt like a little girl again. The daughter who only wanted her parents to be proud. As darkness settled over the vineyard, my father stepped onto the stage. The crowd applauded. He raised his glass. "Thank you all for joining us tonight." He spoke about our family's history, our struggles, the years of hardship, the miracle of Blackwood Vineyard's success. Every sentence brought tears to my eyes. Then he looked directly at me. "Emma." The entire audience turned toward me. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely breathe. He smiled. "You've always been hardworking." The crowd applauded politely. Then he continued. "But every family business needs a leader who can guide the next generation." An assistant walked onto the stage carrying a leather folder. I assumed it contained my appointment papers. My hands trembled. I stepped forward. Instead, my father looked past me. "Ethan." My younger brother stood from his chair. The crowd applauded. At first, I thought it was a joke. Surely Ethan was bringing me the documents. Surely this was part of the ceremony. Then my father embraced him. "Today, I officially appoint my son, Ethan Blackwood, as Chief Executive Officer of Blackwood Vineyards." The world went silent. I couldn't hear the applause. I couldn't hear the music. I couldn't even hear my own heartbeat. I only saw Ethan smiling as he accepted the folder. The same Ethan who had never harvested a single grape. The same Ethan who couldn't tell Cabernet from Merlot. The same Ethan who had spent 12 years enjoying luxury while I was kid until my hands bled. Someone whispered behind me. "Isn't Emma supposed to be CEO? I thought she ran everything. This doesn't make any sense." Neither did it to me. I looked at my parents. Waiting. Begging with my eyes for someone to explain. My father avoided my gaze. My mother walked toward me with a calm expression. She took my hand. Then quietly said the words that destroyed everything I believed about family. "You were never meant to own this business." I stared at her in disbelief. "What?" She squeezed my hand. "You were born to build it." She glanced proudly toward Ethan. He was born to inherit it. Time stopped. 12 years. Reduced to one sentence. I wasn't their daughter. I wasn't their partner. I wasn't even family in that moment. I had simply been the worker they needed until the real heir was ready. I forced a smile so the guests wouldn't see me break. I congratulated Ethan. I shook his hand. Then I walked away before anyone noticed the tears running down my face. As I crossed the vineyard one last time, every vine reminded me of the life I had sacrificed. Every row of grapes whispered the same painful truth. I had built a kingdom, only to be thrown out of it. Little did they know. The kingdom they had just handed to Ethan was standing on a foundation only I understood. And by this time next week, that foundation would be nothing but ashes. I don't remember how long I sat in my car after leaving the celebration. The applause from the estate still echoed in my ears. Every cheer for Ethan felt like another knife twisting deeper into my heart. I stared through the windshield at the vineyard I had spent 12 years saving. The light sparkled across the hills. Guests laughed. Music drifted through the cool night air. Inside that celebration, they were toasting the new CEO. Outside, the woman who had built everything sat alone, wondering if her entire life had been a lie. I wiped away my tears. Then I whispered to myself, "No more." The next morning, I arrived at the vineyard before anyone else. Habit. For 12 years, I had always been the first person through the gate. The security guard smiled. "Good morning, Miss Emma." I smiled back. He had no idea this would be the last morning he would ever greet me. As I walked toward my office, memories flooded every hallway. The conference room where I negotiated our first international contract. The laboratory where I spent months perfecting our award-winning fermentation process. The warehouse where I worked beside employees during harvest season because we couldn't afford extra workers. Every corner of the estate carried a piece of my life. I unlocked my office. Sunlight poured through the windows. The shelves were filled with binders. Cabinets lined one wall from floor to ceiling. Each one held years of work. Supplier contracts. Harvest schedules. Export regulations. Client negotiations. Pricing strategies. Employee training manuals. Vineyard maps. Soil analysis reports. Weather records. Production formulas. Confidential fermentation techniques. Emergency recovery plans. Every decision that had transformed Blackwood Vineyards into a $6 million empire was documented in those files. Nothing important happened without those records. They weren't just paperwork. They were the operating system of the entire business. Without them, the vineyard would become blind. Around 9 o'clock, Ethan walked into my office without knocking. He wore an expensive designer suit, a gold watch, and the confident smile of someone who believed he had already won. He sat in my chair. "My chair now," he said with a grin. I looked at him calmly. "What do you need?" He leaned back and folded his arms. "I'll need access to everything. I'll have IT transfer your email." "I don't mean just the email." He looked around the room. "I want every file. Every password. Every supplier contact. Every client relationship. Every formula. Everything." I studied his face. "Do you understand any of it?" He laughed. "I don't have to. I have employees. They'll figure it out." I almost smiled. That sentence told me everything. He thought success lived inside filing cabinets. He had no idea it lived inside experience. Inside trust. Inside relationships built over 12 years. Just before he left, he stopped at the door. "Oh. One more thing." He tossed an envelope onto my desk. Inside was a termination letter. Effective immediately. No farewell. No consulting agreement. No transition period. No thank you. Just one sentence. "Your services are no longer required." I folded the letter carefully. Then looked at my brother. "I hope you're ready." He smirked. "For what?" "Running everything." He laughed again. "How hard can making wine be?" Then he walked away. I closed the office door. Locked it. And stood completely still. For several minutes, I simply looked around the room. 12 years. Every birthday missed. Every holiday canceled. Every vacation postponed. Every relationship that failed because I always chose work first. Everything I had sacrificed was sitting inside these cabinets. I wasn't angry anymore. I was empty. Then I made a decision. Not out of revenge. Out of closure. I opened every cabinet. Removed every binder. Every handwritten notebook. Every draft. Every planning journal. Every personal strategy file. I stacked them neatly in the stone fireplace that had sat unused in my office for years. One by one, the shelves became empty. The office echoed with silence. I struck a single match. For a moment, I hesitated. These pages contained the best years of my life. Then I remembered my mother's words. You were born to build it. The match slipped from my fingers. The fire caught slowly. Orange flames climbed across the paper. Ink curled into black smoke. Page after page disappeared into glowing ash. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I simply watched. Not because I wanted to destroy the vineyard, but because I refused to leave behind the pieces of myself they believed they were entitled to own. When the fire finally died, nothing remained except gray ashes. I placed my office keys on the desk. Picked up one small box containing my family photograph and a coffee mug a former employee had given me years earlier. That was all I took. Everything else I left behind. As I walked through the front gate for the final time, dozens of employees watched me in confusion. Some quietly thanked me. Some shook my hand. Some hugged me with tears in their eyes. One elderly vineyard worker stopped me before I reached my car. He had worked beside me since my very first day. With trembling hands, he said, "Miss Emma, this place was never the buildings. It was you." I couldn't answer. I simply hugged him. Then I drove away without looking back. 7 days later, Blackwood Vineyards would discover that replacing a title was easy. Replacing the person who built an empire was impossible. 7 days. That's all it took. 7 days for 12 years of discipline to disappear. 7 days for arrogance to destroy what loyalty had built. And on the morning of the 8th day, my phone rang. The caller ID read, "Dad." For 12 years, he had never called me during business hours unless something was wrong. I stared at the screen. It stopped ringing. Then it rang again. And again. By lunchtime, I had 18 missed calls. I didn't answer a single one. The news reached me before my parents did. A longtime supplier called. "Emma, what happened over there?" "What do you mean?" "They canceled 3 export shipments." Another call came 20 minutes later. "Our contract was terminated because nobody could explain the new pricing structure." An hour later, one of our biggest restaurant partners emailed me. "We've suspended all future orders until someone can clarify production schedules." I quietly closed my laptop. Everything was happening exactly as I feared. Not because I had sabotaged the company. Because no one left behind understood how the business actually worked. The confidential supplier discounts I had negotiated over 12 years had expired. The harvest schedule had been changed by people who didn't understand grape maturity. Premium grapes were picked too early. Thousands of bottles failed quality inspection. International buyers canceled shipments. Employees received conflicting instructions from Ethan. Half the management team resigned within 4 days. The bank froze a major expansion loan after reviewing the company's sudden instability. Investors began asking questions. Questions Ethan couldn't answer. By the end of the week, Blackwood Vineyards had lost contracts worth more than $6 million. The same empire they believed would run itself was collapsing in real time. Late Friday evening, someone knocked on my front door. I already knew who it was. When I opened it, my parents stood there. They looked 10 years older. My father's expensive suit was wrinkled. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying. Behind them stood Ethan. For the first time in his life, he wasn't smiling. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, my father lowered his head. "We need your help." I looked at the three people who had replaced me without hesitation. The new CEO is standing right there. Ethan couldn't meet my eyes. My mother stepped forward. Emma, please. The company is falling apart. We made a mistake. Those words should have felt satisfying. Instead, they felt empty. Because an apology after betrayal doesn't erase the betrayal. My father took another step toward me. We'll make you CEO. We'll transfer shares. We'll give you whatever you want. I smiled sadly. 12 years ago. I didn't want shares. I didn't want the title. I didn't even want more money. I only wanted my family to believe in me. Silence. You waited until everything was falling apart to realize my value. My mother's tears rolled down her cheeks. We're your family. I nodded. Family doesn't use one child to build an empire. Then hand it to another. Ethan finally spoke. I'm sorry. I thought running the business would be easy. I thought the employees would handle everything. I looked directly into his eyes. You thought leadership came with an office. It doesn't. It comes from earning people's trust. And trust can't be inherited. For the first time, he understood. I walked to the bookshelf in my living room. From a drawer, I removed a single framed photograph. It showed the vineyard 12 years earlier. Dead vines. Broken fences. Rusted machinery. I handed it to my father. Remember this? He nodded slowly. That's what I inherited. Then I placed a recent photograph beside it. Award-winning vineyards. Modern facilities. Thousands of healthy vines. This. I built. I looked at all three of them. You didn't lose $6 million because I burned some files. You lost $6 million the moment you believed the person who built the business didn't matter. I picked up the folder they had brought. Inside was a new contract. Chief Executive Officer. Majority ownership. Full operational control. Exactly what they had refused to give me 1 week earlier. Without reading another page, I closed the folder. Then I handed it back. No. Their faces turned pale. My father whispered. You're refusing? Yes. But this is very thing you've worked for. I shook my head. No. It was everything I worked for. Now. It's everything I walked away from. 6 months later. Blackwood Vineyards was sold to a multinational wine corporation for a fraction of its former value. The Blackwood family name disappeared from every bottle forever. As for me, I accepted an offer from a respected winery overseas. This time, I didn't turn it down. Within 3 years, I became a partner in a new vineyard. Unlike before, the people around me valued skill over favoritism. Loyalty over entitlement. Respect over bloodlines. One autumn afternoon, as I stood among endless rows of healthy vines, my assistant asked me a question. Do you ever regret leaving your family's vineyard? I smiled as the wind carried the scent of ripe grapes across the hills. No. They thought I was just an employee. They never realized. I was the vineyard. And when they threw me away, they unknowingly threw away their future. The end.